Good morning, good afternoon to you guys anywhere in the world you are. You're watching this video live now or you'll be watching it later on. Welcome to my channel and it's good to be with you. We're going to continue our previous discussion about understanding and analyzing the toxicity in our environment, a fact that is a major threat not just to our health, longevity, well-being, the quality of our life we have, but also to the future of our beautiful planet, the environment which is supposed to accommodate the future generations. So this is not about just I or you, but also for the future of our beautiful children and the future generations to come. The purpose of this series of talks, even though hearing the information could be scary, but is more about sharing the information in the right way. So each one of us as individual become more aware of the truth so that we could do something about it. Don't ever forget, you as an individual, maybe you're just 1% as you see, but in the truth, you're connected to everything, and every decision you make, every thought comes to your mind, every action you choose to take is changing the fundamental outcome of the entire universe. So you are strong, my friend. And use this strength, put our hands together based on the conscious mind and an open heart to give so that we could create a better life, not just for now, for everybody around us, including ourselves, but also for the future to come. So without being afraid of what you are going to hear or what you have heard through these lectures about the truth about contamination in our world, let's hear the continuation of our discussion so that we ultimately can come up with a solution about how to take care of these problems. Just to summary of whatever we went through so far, we talked about the reports by the US Protection and Environmental Agency that announces about billions of obnoxious chemicals are being used and released fundamentally into our environment, to air, water, and soil. Another studies published by the Environmental Science and Technology Journal, which is a peer-reviewed journal published by the American Chemical Society. It talks about the fact that there are about more than 350,000 chemicals and mixtures are registered for production and use worldwide. We talked about what they are adding to our food, which is more than 10,000 various chemicals in terms of colors, preservatives, flavor enhancers, and so on. We talked about the 350 different E-color, the European Union categorizations. In 1950s, chemical contamination became a serious problem, but even before that, they were used in the industry. In 1920s, it was only a few million tons per year, the production of these chemicals. Today, it goes beyond a few billions of tons of chemicals on yearly basis. We talked about plastic contamination. Plastic that is used everywhere. We see it everywhere. There is an area about 1.6 million square kilometers on the northeast of Pacific Ocean called Eastern Garbage Patch, which contains roughly about 45,000 to 129,000 metric tons of fibers of plastic and microplastic by the assessment done back in 2018. About 5 trillion plastic bags are used annually worldwide, which is about 160,000 of them per second, and ultimately they're thrown out into the environment. And as we have spoken before, when plastic turns into microplastic because of the shape close to some sort of hormones like estrogen types hormones, and they have affinity for fat, they enter the food chain through the marine life and then later on into other forms of animals and plants, and ultimately end up on our food table. And they disturb the health and balance because they mimic hormones in us, and because they cannot be digested by the nature, because there's no enzyme naturally to break down plastics, because they are man-made, never been naturally produced by the nature, they remain trapped in our body as well. That means they could disturb our hormone system, they could disturb the fatty organs in our body or tissues. The brain is made of fat. The membrane of every cell, which is the very functional part of the cell, is made of fat 100%. So they embed themselves within these fatty elements in us, and they cause a lot of disturbances in our health and vitality, predisposing us to chronic diseases, degenerative diseases, autoimmune diseases. Imagine something stuck on our tissue. The job of the immune system is to eliminate that. But when the enzymes produced by the immune factors or soldiers is incapable of digesting these particles, the more and more enzymes are thrown at these antigens, they disturb the tissue around them, and this is called now the autoimmune condition. Think about the number of the people complaining about hormone imbalances, including thyroid issues or fertility issues or things like that. There are a lot of microplastic in the water bottle that we drink. It's almost proven almost 100% of every bottled water contains microplastic, sometimes up to 240,000 fragments of it per liter. We also talked about other sources of contamination in the food, including food additives and preservatives. And additional to that, we talked about genetically modification, when they change the genome of the food we receive and the consequence of that. We talked about added hormones to the livestock, to the cattle industry, fishery industry, poultry industry, and things like that. We briefly talked about heavy metals in the food, which today, if we get a chance, we're going to talk about heavy metals in more details. And man-made chemicals, the stuff that could never existed in the nature naturally, similar to plastic, like PCBs, dioxin, or stuff like that. So a lot of pesticide and herbicides are used in our food, crops, and therefore they distribute into our environment constantly. They are the same as plastic. Many of them cannot be digested properly by the environment, and therefore when they enter our body, they create disturbances. If you remember, I talked about a report by the Journal of the Environmental and Analytical Toxicology. This is evaluation of prenatal pesticide exposure. They checked about 9 types of pesticide in meconium in the first stool of newborn babies, and they detected these samples with much higher levels than usually seen in the environment. So our babies are contaminated before they are born, and that has to do a lot with the environment. And this meconium, the first stool, contained landine. This is a pesticide used in the US to get rid of termite. They contain also PCBs. The Human Adipose Tissue Survey, which was a 20-year analysis of the fat samples of living organisms, including human, proved that these chemicals exist in the environment, and they just recycle. They never go away. Even DDT, which was banned in the early 70s or even before that, or PCBs, which were banned in 77, still exists in the fat of polar bears or the penguins, whether you go to the Arctic, which is the north, or Antarctica, which is the south. And these chemicals never used directly in that environment, but it circulates around the globe. And they cause genetic damages because they change the genome. They break down our regular balance of the genome. They predispose our body to autoimmune diseases, as I mentioned earlier, degenerative diseases, including cancer, hormone disruptions, problems, or thyroid diseases, as well as developmental problems in small little infants and children. Today, the subject of our talk is about smog, air pollutants, exhaust emission. And then if we get a chance, we'll talk about heavy metal. In next sessions, we are going to talk about pharmaceutical products that leak into the environment, cosmetic products and the toxicity that comes with it, unsafe cookware use, like Teflons, aluminum pots and stuff like that, smoking, vapes, shisha, I'll talk about a little bit today about that aluminum part on the top of it, or processed tobacco and so on. And if you get a chance later on, we'll talk about in next sessions about perverse energy, a lot of electromagnetic field of energy which is affecting the health and balance of our environment constantly. Okay, let's talk about air pollution. These are serious problems nowadays, and constantly they produce major havoc into not the health of the humanity or the biology of Earth, but also economy as well. They disturb the ozone layer, especially using aerosol chemicals like what is in hairsprays, for example, because they contain volatile oil. Or there are other chemicals called hydrofluorocarbons, which are for refrigeration. These are the gases that produce cooling effect. When they are released, they damage the ozone layer, which is supposed to protect the UV not to reach the surface of the Earth. The greenhouse gases, similar to CO2, we have methane as well, which is even more potent than CO2, nitrous oxide and stuff like that. They trap the heat on the surface of the planet, causing changes in the seasons of various geographical places. They could trigger stronger storm, unusual heat waves, drought, flooding, shifting the seasons, and other atmospheric problems or seasonal problems. Just consider the environment of the planet Earth before the Industrial Revolution, which was in the mid 18th century, and today. Just think about the amount of antigen, the chemicals, which started to produce and release by the industry into the nature. Of course, it was an unprecedented technological advancement started in England in about 1770, when the spinning jenny was invented. The first practical steam engine was actually invented in 1712, but from the mid of the 18th century and on, Industrial Revolution became a very major factor in changing the global work, behavior, atmosphere, economy, and politics as well. After England, the rest of the Europe and then US followed that. The problem was that it produced a lot of, as we spoke, negative compounds released into our environment, and it caused widespread pollutions, resource depletion, and then, of course, ecosystem disruptions. Based on the use of fossil fuel and mass production, fundamentally, it changed the relationship between humanity and the natural world, leaving a legacy of environmental challenges that persist still until today. These harmful pollutants distributed into the air, water, and soil everywhere. There was a famous London smog back in 1952, which caused thousands of deaths because of the contamination into the air. And the factories started to dump untreated waste into the rivers, the closed streams, and things like that. It was an easy way to get rid of what they didn't want to keep. And they started harming aquatic life. When aquatic life, which is a source of the planetary food, is contaminated and faces problem, everything else starts to happen from that, because everything depends on the food chain. So what are toxins and pollutants? These are chemicals or biochemical compounds that disturb the natural balance of health. Health is the state of balance. Anything that disturbs this balance is considered as toxin. Could be physical, chemical, or energetic. They are the source of creation of diseases, or they could deteriorate the existing diseases in us. And when we talk about planet Earth, as I mentioned earlier many times, you have to understand that Earth is a living entity by itself. It's alive, and therefore it has to be kept in a healthy way. And this is our job as human to take care of our Mother Earth. This smog that is widespread now, causing environmental problem, it does not only become a problem of the urban society, but also the rural societies as well. Everywhere, the smog cannot be stopped. If one country produces a lot of unwanted smoke, it travels everywhere. It doesn't contain itself within the borders of that country. It is usually a combination of smoke and fog together, which create a toxic haze covering over the large cities. I'm sure many of you have witnessed that. The typical cause of this smog is a combination of industrial emissions. Imagine the factories, the power plants, all of them emitting large quantities of smoke, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide. Burning fossil fuels is another source of creation of smog. These power plant facilities, they have to produce energy to boil the water in order to produce the electricity. Many of them still today work based on burning fossil fuels, including coals. Vehicle exhaust and engine emissions, cars, trucks, buses. Imagine the various chemicals and particles they release into our atmosphere. And of course, natural factors, geographical ones, and the weather patterns, like dust particles they see in our environment here as we are. They have a far-reaching effects, and they go everywhere because of the circulation of the weather patterns. You will see them now in every part of the planet. The U.S. Environmental and Protection Agencies has reported that transportation sector contributes about 28% of all airborne pollutants released into our atmosphere annually, 28%. There's estimated about 1.65 billion cars running on our planet. That estimation was done back in 2025. The exhaust fumes include carbon monoxide. The problem with carbon monoxide is that when it binds to our hemoglobin, it cannot be released anymore. As opposed to carbon dioxide, which is a natural gas. We can release carbon dioxide from hemoglobin on our exhale, whereas the monoxide will stick to that hemoglobin for as long as that red blood cells stays alive. So for 120 days, that red blood cells work in our body, moves in our body, in our blood system, but is not functional anymore because it cannot get rid of the carbon monoxide which has been bound to it. So it becomes useless actually. So we have the blood, but oxygenation cannot happen properly. We have methane from exhaust fumes, which is a kind of greenhouse, and it entraps heat. And actually it is responsible for roughly about 1/3 of global warming. We have nitrogen oxides in terms of NO or NO2. They produce acidic rain. When there's acidic rain, the soil becomes eroded. So we use the power of the agricultural soil ultimately. There are particulate matters. These are typical particles, either solid or liquid, which remain suspended in air because they are very, very small and tiny. We have volatile organic compounds, as I mentioned earlier, similar to what is found in hairsprays, for instance. Sulfur dioxide, again, ending up with acidic rain and spoiling and damaging the agricultural soil. We have certain hydrocarbons like benzene and toluene. These are so toxic when they enter our body through breathing, when the air is polluted, they create fundamental damage to the bone marrow. Bone marrow in our body is the factor responsible for manufacturing of the blood. Of course, the immune system is highly connected to this bone marrow health as well. So as you see, human impact is way beyond just respiratory problems such as asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, and so on. They disturb the balance of the cardiovascular system, so heart diseases, stroke, things like that could be predisposed. And of course, degenerative diseases, including cancer. This is one of the reasons why cancer nowadays is rising so rapidly in most of the societies all around the world. There are triggers for various diseases, as I mentioned earlier. The other chemicals in the smog, as I mentioned earlier, we can talk about hydrofluorocarbon. These are used in refrigeration or refrigerators, and they create the cooling effect. But when they are released, they travel to the higher level of atmosphere and they damage the ozone layer. And they also contribute in global warming, is even more potent than CO2 itself. Some of the gasoline that are used by the cars all around the world are leaded. Still, lead is used in their manufacturing, and by combustion of this kind of fuel, the lead is released into the environment, and of course, it's a major disruptive to our health and balance. It's a part of nasty heavy metals that then enters our body, it cannot get out. The brake in the cars, the brake pads, and also the tires of the cars are also containing a lot of another toxic metal called cadmium. This is also a heavy metal. So when cars are going down the hill and they apply on the brake, or when they have to, when in any places that tires of the cars are consumed faster than average, they release a lot of these toxic chemicals into the air, and it stays in the air. And when people walk, or especially they run as exercising close to the highways or crowded roads, actually they inhale a lot of garbage chemicals into their lung, which is completely, should be prohibited. Now, you've seen chemtrails, airplanes flying in high altitudes and releasing a lot of, looks like water vapor, but a lot of different gases. There's a lot of controversy on that. Some people say that they contain small particles of aluminum, barium, and cesium, basically for weather control, for projecting the sunlight back into the atmosphere to prevent excessive heating. But conspiracy theories talk about other intentions that are behind this thing. It's not verified completely, but this is something that later on you can consider and do your own search online. And additional one is that there is small little dust particles in the air of the desert land. You know, our trachea and bronchia, these are the airway tubes. They produce a lot of mucus so that they can entrap any small particles that comes in through the breathing when they pass the filters of the nose, because the hair in the nose and the mucus will entrap many of them. But the smaller one could pass through and they get trapped within these wind tubes. And there are small little hair type structure on the surface of these cells that constantly move upward so that they can bring back whatever that is trapped towards the throat, so you can excrete it out or swallow it. But when these dust particles become very, very small, as we experience here, living in the desert area, they could easily pass through all the way down and enter the tissue at the end and trigger constant inflammation. And that is a predisposition to degenerations. And lung is very, very important, not only to help us with oxygenation, but also is a center of the immune system as well. And think about when the immune system is disturbed in any ways. Now, I'm going to briefly talk about toxic metals and heavy metals, another form of contamination that exists in the air, but also through the air. It goes through the soil, or is trapped in the soil and water, or through the food industry or any other industrial activities, which has become a major threat to our health today. These are individual metals or metallic compounds which have negative effect on health and biology of our planet, including our bodies. The major ones include mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic, and also we consider aluminum as a part of them too. They are toxic in larger amounts, and there is a biochemical reactions happening with them, because again, when they stick to the tissue, they cannot be removed, and they trigger an unprecedented immune reaction to get rid of them. And when immune soldiers work hard to get rid of something like plastic I mentioned earlier, or heavy metals here, which are stuck to the tissue, especially to the fat members of the cells start to break down. They cause damage. They could build up in the body and in biological system, so they become a significant hazard in future. Heavy metals are metals with high density, higher atomic number. They are heavy, and the toxicity may include as follow. With lead and mercury, we have a lot of damages to our nerve system, to the central nervous system, brain, any form of nerve structure. Their bioaccumulations is completely obvious within the marine life, within the fishery and sea life, sea creatures, because our oceans are contaminated nowadays with mercury because of the industry. So they damage the central nervous system. We have cadmium. This is carcinogenic, actually, and they cause negative effects on the kidneys and also health of the bones. I'll explain these things a little bit in more details in just a few minutes. We have arsenic. Arsenic is also carcinogenic. It's found in the water, soil, especially contaminated soil, and a lot of different pesticides. Arsenic is the one that they use to get rid of the mice and rat. Chromium. Chromium, in comparison to its natural state, there is another form of it, which is when the compound has lost about 6 electrons. It's called the hexavalent form, which becomes very, very toxic to the body. You see the green color in tattoos? This is chromium. We have thallium as well, which contaminates fruits and vegetables, especially leafy vegetables, if they are grown in thallium-contaminated soil. There are other metals like zinc, iron, copper, manganese. In small amount, they are essential, very essential to our body, but in larger amount, they could cause toxicity as well. Aluminum is another one, although it's not considered a heavy metal by the biochemical compound, by the chemistry of it, or the chemistry standard definition, but because of the horrendous side effects it has in terms of damaging the human health and the biology of Earth, we consider it as a potential toxic element. How do they cause problem with our health? They basically contaminate the sulfur group on our enzymes, which are protein molecules. Enzymes with sulfur are detoxification enzymes. When the sulfur groups are contaminated or damaged, the enzymes can no longer continue their natural work of detoxification. So the toxic level starts to build up in our body. One of these other side effects of these heavy metals is to increase the blood pressure in the people who are sensitive. They create constant fatigue and loss of energy. Mercury has a special affinity for thyroid glands. They increase inflammation, increase free radical, they decrease antioxidants, which are supposed to get rid of the free radicals in our body. And this altogether causes predisposition to chronic diseases. There is a protein molecule called metallothionein. This is a very, very important piece of protein manufactured in liver and kidneys, and its job is to bind to magnesium, copper, zinc, not magnesium, zinc, copper, and also heavy metal, so it can remove them. If there is excessive amount of heavy metal, this metallothionein molecule, which are very, very important for our health and longevity and a strong immune system, becomes depleted. They contain cysteine and histidine. These are sulfur-containing amino acids. Is a part of glutathione system in our lung, which is a very important component of the immune system. So as you can see, the immune system becomes paralyzed, toxicity remains trapped in our body, and this is a major degeneration to and predisposition to chronic diseases. And of course, zinc and copper becomes depleted, which are really, really essential to keep our body healthy and balanced. Almost nowadays, a lot of people take zinc and elements like that as supplements. Now, where do we find mercury? Mercury is found in dental amalgams. A lot of it is a combination of mercury, copper, tin, and silver. It is banned in many countries, but still is used in other places as well. So get rid of these amalgams through biological dentistry. We have mercury, organic form of mercury as thimerosal, still used in some of the vaccines. Some of the flu vaccines still contain thimerosal. This is an antiseptic and antifungal which is used in manufacturing of some of these vaccines, but they cause problems in sensitive people as well. Ethyl mercury is a very toxic form of mercury. Still is found in some of the medications and so on. In some other medical waste or industrial waste also, there is a lot of mercury which is released in the environment. Burning coal is another source of releasing mercury. And in a natural ways, through volcanic activities A lot of mercury could be released into the soil, water, and environment as well. So mercury has a bioaccumulation effect in our body and also biomagnification through the food chain. So it stays in the food and just carries on and on. Central nervous system problem, including brain and the nerves, especially in children, small children, and pregnant mothers when the fetus is being developed in them. So next time you want your advice to do flu vaccine while you're pregnant, in my naturopathic opinion, you have to think double. Don't just trust what the doctors are trained to tell you. Think about it. If necessary, if this is your choice, that's a different story. But in our opinion, professional opinion, you should avoid stuff like that to reduce the chance of harming your future newborn. Lead also has a bioaccumulative effect in the organs and in the environment as well. So they cause also a lot of problems by time in the food chain. A lot of other common sources of lead contaminations could come from lead pipes in older places, not here. The brand new cities don't have them, but in older places they use water pipes made from lead that increase the lead concentration in the drinking water. Or when water is being treated by old machines, water and food by old machines, old tankers, stuff like that. Occupational exposure, lead batteries, some metallic jewelries, interesting, ceramic tiles, some plastic toys, they may all contain lead. Chronic exposure to lead is also a biohazard to damage our nervous system, especially again in children and pregnant mother. It leads to developmental delay, behavioral changes, and reducing the IQ. Mild exposure to lead over time could create fatigue, sleep disturbances, irritability, abdominal discomfort, headaches, constipation, decreased appetite, muscle pain or aches, and also difficulties in concentration. Now, aluminum. As I said earlier, aluminum is not considered as a heavy metal, but because of horrendous side effects, we discuss it alongside with the heavy metals. Aluminum poisoning slowly by time could create a lot of neurological symptoms like delayed brain and neural development, neural degeneration, loss of memory, confusion, speech problems, and impaired motor coordination. So think about autistic children or vulnerable children to this kind of stuff. They could also affect the health of our bone. They could cause bone degenerations and predisposing to more fractures by softening the bones and lower bone densities because they disturb calcium and phosphate metabolism in our body. They could create also pulmonary problems, fibrosis of the lung due to inhalation of aluminum vapors or chemicals in the air because of industry, because of occupational hazard, or the ladies who smoke shisha. How does this shisha work? They put an aluminum foil on the top of the tobacco, which is not really a tobacco, and they put hot charcoal on the top of that aluminum foil, and when they inhale, the charcoal becomes really, really hot so that it can burn the tobacco, not knowing that it's also causing oxidation in that aluminum foil, and even tiny particles are inhaled. They will be trapped in your body forever, and think about the health of your lung. Originally, shisha was just charcoal on the top of the good quality, natural kind of tobacco, not what it is today. Aluminum is also famous to cause various kidney problems, especially if it's ingested in larger amount through the food. With the gastrointestinal system, it could cause nausea, vomiting, constipation, and these are common side effects of aluminum exposure in the food. Or muscle weakness. They interfere with muscle function, leading to muscle pain and weakness over time. Where can we find aluminum? in the contaminated water and food, as I mentioned earlier, from cheap cookware, aluminum cookware, especially when the coating is scratched and you put acidic food in it, aluminum leaks guaranteed, and you consume that. Through some packing also, food becomes contaminated. Um, some medications like antacids, for example, or buffered aspirin, they have aluminum compounds in them. In vaccines, aluminum salts are used as adjuvant. Adjuvants are molecules that make the vaccines work. But aluminum salt in the vaccine, when they're injected, is different than you consume it through the mouth. They end up in the central nervous system, especially the brain. Adjuvants are used to increase the antibody production effect of the vaccines, usually like aluminum phosphate, aluminum hydroxide, or things like that. As I mentioned, through occupational exposure, like workers in mining, welding with aluminum, and they inhale that vapor of aluminum. Antiperspirant products, the one that people use on their armpits, many of them, commercial ones, may contain aluminum. You have to be careful, read the labels before you get them. So when heavy metals enter the food chain, the plant absorbs them through their roots, and the cattle consume them, and they become accumulated over time into their body, fat, muscles, and stuff like that. And when we consume them, it enters our body as well. Agricultural pesticide may contain a lot of various forms of heavy metals, especially some of the fertilizers. With food processing techniques and equipment, as I said earlier, the metals could migrate from old machinery, storage tanks, and packaging material into our food. And because the seawater is contaminated with various forms of heavy metals, especially mercury, you have to be careful with consumption of large fish, swordfish, some species of tuna like bluefin tuna. They could easily be contaminated with mercury nowadays. And think about the bioaccumulation effect. Okay, there's also anthropogenic mercury, what is produced by people, not necessarily by the nature, and enters the environment at the oceans. There's an estimate of about 80,000 to 450,000 metric tons of anthropogenic mercury in the seawater. Actually, it's about 2,200 metric ton of this mercury is produced every year and dumped into the environment, mostly due to gold mining and other sort of industrial activity. And then we have arsenic. We have organic and non-organic arsenic. Organic arsenic used to be available through chicken feeders, given to chicken, but it is banned. Like in 2014, it was banned by the FDA, U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and before that it was banned by the European Union. But still, in some areas, some society, it might be used. But non-organic mercury is very toxic, and usually it is found in the soil. A lot of rice brands are contaminated with arsenic nowadays. And to get rid of it, you have to wash the rice properly and boil it with a larger amount of water and dump the water, and then you can cook your rice. Cadmium is another form of heavy metal. As I said earlier, it exists in the car tires and car brake pads, also in cigarettes, because tobacco plants absorb arsenic very easily. They cause bone demineralization, they cause kidney damage, they accumulate in man in their prostate in a large amount, and in the female in their cervix. So if you are a smoker, we're going to talk about smoking hopefully next week, but you have to have a better choices, know what you're doing, and detox your body. The contamination with cadmium reduces vitamin D, it increases urinary calcium loss, inhibits osteoblasts, the cells which produce bone, and encourage osteoclasts, the cells that break down the bones. So they disturb bone modeling balance in our system, in our body. That's why they affect on the health of our bones. How could consumers protect themselves and reduce their exposure? This is simple, and with small little acts, you could do a lot. For example, wash fruits, vegetables, and grains thoroughly to remove the surface contaminants. Change your diet frequently. Don't stick with some form of diet for a long time, like one form of grain, one form of fish. Change them frequently. Use more reputable brands, the brands that you investigate and you have more trust in them. And avoid using low quality cookwares, which are very, very important. About rice, as I mentioned earlier, wash it properly, boil it with larger amount of water initially, get rid of it, and then cook your rice. And limit the consumption of the predator fish, especially during pregnancy. Now, one question: are heavy metals really, really dangerous? The answer is no. They become dangerous when they enter in larger amount for longer time into our body. Our body is designed to get rid of them when there's a natural small little process coming to our body. But we get stuck with it when there is a lot of contaminations with that. It mostly depends on the concentration in the food we consume, the type of the metal, the amount we consume, and the individual vulnerability. So, I think we are almost done. It's already 41 minutes. I was supposed to finish it before 30 minutes. We'll leave the rest of it for next session. Send me any questions or concerns you may have. Participate in this kind of information exchange. Share it with the ones who might be interested to know that knowing these things will enlighten. Your knowledge is enlightenment, because now when we are more knowledgeable, we can do so much more. This is not just to create a healthier future for us, less diseases for us, but also a healthier environment for our future generations to come. After all, this is the only home that we have. And you, my friend, you are the owner. So take care of your home properly. Give care for this beautiful planet, for your environment. And know that anything you decide, anything you put in action, it is considered as a major influence into the outcome of the entire universe. I wish you the best, and I hope to see you next week with our next talk. All the best.